You're watching Wilmington on CBS 10 WILM. Here's your host, Don Ansell.
And we're back talking about fixing the economy with our power panel of local experts. Let me reintroduce them for you. Dr. Tom Simpson is a former staffer for the Federal Reserve Board and currently an executive in residence at UNCW. Dr. Ron Copley is an investment advisor and a financial analyst, and Dr. Clay Moffett is in the Finance and Economics Department at UNC Wilmington. Thank you all for being here. We live in a fast food mindset today, and we expect instant results and instant gratification. What's a reasonable time frame for evaluating whether all of this is working? Ron, what do you think?
I would hope that it would take place quickly. I don't think it will. My clients that I work with on investment advising, retirement planning, those who are in retirement or close to retirement, I'm saying don't count on it. So give it, if it's going to be within a 5-year period, that'd be great. I don't believe that's going to happen.
And you're pulling all your clients out of the stock market, you told me off
Absolutely.
camera. And we'll talk a little more detail about that. Tom, what's a reasonable time frame for this?
Well, I think to be able to determine whether things are starting to stabilize, I think we want to see some evidence that, as I mentioned before, the real estate market is stabilizing, and that the financial system is starting to right itself. And we're seeing little traces here and there that things are improving, but we see an awful lot of bad news as well. So at this point, it's really hard to sort everything out and say that on net we're getting.
The administration is sort of alluding to a 2-year, 3-year time frame.
Right. But I think by the end of this year, I would hope to see the pieces falling in place to suggest that we're going to have some sustained recovery.
And I know you don't think it's going to work, but
I would say the past 75 years give us the timeline that we need to know. Basically this administration holds that what we've learned in macroeconomics since 1936 has been invalidated. These type of extreme spending programs, quote unquote stimulus programs, didn't work for Hoover, it didn't work for Roosevelt, didn't work for Jimmy Carter, didn't work for Gerald Ford, didn't work for Japan in the 90s, didn't work for Bush in 2001, Bush in 2008. Government cannot stimulate aggregate demand because it doesn't create anything. For every dollar it spends, it has to take a dollar from somebody else.
Anybody
so
have
it redistributes.
Another view from that?
That particular view is the crowding out effect. And the crowding out effect, in my opinion, is real. If the government's going to go into the capital markets, there's a finite amount of money. And if the government's taking a larger piece of that pie, that's less that the private sector has to offer.
Well, I think the government can provide stimulus, can provide jobs. So I think these policies are pointing in the right direction. I think they tend to get oversold, and we have to rely on the resiliency of the private economy to a very large extent. But we're in one of those very unusual circumstances where without government action, we could be talking about very, very severe consequences.
What about the first financial bailout in the closing months of the Bush presidency? I don't want to take too long with this, but can you quickly evaluate that? And I want to know if institutions that got money should be forced to give an accounting of where that money went.
We know how it'll work. GM got $30 billion and is about to declare bankruptcy.
All right.
In a nutshell, that's it.
Ron?
Well, it's Rick Santelli, the rage that he gave, I think is very real. The moral hazard of rewarding those who make bad decisions is very real. The country, I think, is upset. A lot of people are very upset over this. So I don't think that should have happened the way that it has happened. I would think that, according to what Tom said, would be better. Cutting tax rates would be
Was
a better
it
way.
irresponsible of Paulson, former Secretary of Treasury, not to require accounting of where this money is going?
Well, I think it's very hard. I mean, you're talking about funds that are fungible here, and so to be able to trace dollars that come in the form of capital infusions from the federal government, to trace where they've gone, I think it's a very difficult thing to do. if we go back and look at the circumstances at the time this bill was enacted and when the program got started, our financial system was in probably the worst crisis it's been since the 1930s. Things have improved since that time. The government, of course, has provided an awful lot of capital to major financial institutions, and at the time the view was we've got to fix the financial system so that the financial system can provide the financing for the economy. And by and large, I think things have gotten better. Whether those funds could have been deployed in little different ways that would have been more effective, perhaps they could have.
So it just didn't go off into the abyss. You think there was some sound evidence of
right. I think that
help.
in places that were really under stress at the time that this bill was enacted and when the money was starting to put in, a lot of those areas, they're kind of invisible to most people, but a lot of those areas are functioning better. And take a look at mortgage rates, for example. Mortgage rates have dropped a considerable amount, and refinancing activity and
is brisk.
Starting to pick up anyway. Right. So there are effects here that I'm not sure we would have seen absent the deployment of those funds.
Let's move on to the $410 billion omnibus spending bill, which has been signed into law. This is additional revenue for the government to get through the fiscal year, which ends September 30. One of the big issues about this was the load of pork, dollars that were attached to it. And I think you mentioned before we went on camera, 8,570 earmarks, something like a $7.7 billion price tag on those. First of all, quickly, what are your thoughts on earmarks, Tom?
Oh, I think they're shameful. And I would really like to see somebody launch an effective political campaign to eliminate those.
Ron?
Oh, I agree, totally, 100%. Now, the Obama administration, to its credit, has said if you're going to get earmarks or pork, you're going to have to explain it on your website so everybody can see. I think disclosure, transparency is a big part of correcting the issue.
Clay? I know you're so supportive of
Yeah, the
not, by the way.
Not the whole spending package. I was just thinking about the stimulus bill. President Obama said it will create like 3 million jobs. That if you do the math, it comes down to about $275,000 per job. The average household income in the country is what, $50,000? I just think the whole package of all three bills is insane.
There's a lot of doublespeak going on from both sides of the aisle on earmarks. There were the president's comments during the campaign. And then last week, I heard South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham say that he stands by his earmarks for a Myrtle Beach Convention Center and believes that senators should be able to bring money back to their states if the process is, as you said, Ron, transparent, and if the project makes sense. We're going to come back and talk to each of our panelists about that statement and about transparency and if they make sense. So stay with us. We'll be right back.